Good evening. You're watching Arirang News at 8. It's Thursday, January 2nd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hae. We begin this evening in Sejong City, where the government kicked off the new year with its first meeting of 2014. Our Hwang Ji-hae has more on how the year-old city moved a step closer to becoming a regional administrative hub for Korea.
The Korean government held its first meeting of the new year on Thursday in the central city of Sejong. It was the first time the meeting was held in the new administrative city. The meeting led by Prime Minister Chung Hong-won was also broadcast live at the central government complex in Seoul. The government's annual New Year's meeting has been held in Seoul for the past 40 years, but starting this year, it will take place at the government complex in Sejong. Around 600 officials that represent government entities in the new administrative hub took part in the meeting. Prime Minister Chung said the nation's administrative system is at a turning point.
Despite the difficulties we face with the government office relocation plan, we should consider this as a chance to advance the nation's administrative system.
Around 10,000 officials from 31 ministries and state agencies, including the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Ministry, are now working in Sejong following the second phase of a government office relocation plan that wrapped up last December. The new administrative center is the legacy of an election pledge by the late President Roh Moo-hyun in the early 2000s that aims to diminish the focus on the nation's capital and achieve balanced regional development. Hwang Ji-hae, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has no plans right now to reshuffle her cabinet. Now, during an emergency news conference on Thursday at the presidential office of Cheongwade, Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Ki-chun refuted looming speculation that the president could replace some underperforming ministers in her second year in office. Now, adding now is an important time to focus on running state affairs. The presidential office reportedly called the presser out of concern that the speculation could create distractions at government ministries at the start of the new year. Political watchers, however, took note of Kim's choice of words in the press conference, as he said there were no plans right now for a reshuffle, possibly leaving the door open for the one down the line. Moving over to the National Assembly, after passing the 2014 budget bill and other key legislation in the wee hours of the new year, Korea's rival parties are now turning their attention to local elections set for June. Arirang News' National Assembly correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports.
The ruling Saenuri Party is determined to win a landslide victory in the June local elections, in which more than 3,900 local government seats are up for grabs. It plans to harness all party resources and energy for the elections in a bid to empower the Park Geun-hye administration. As the first regional elections under the Park administration, the June elections will serve as an interim evaluation of her presidency.
It's time for us to pull up our collars and approach the public with a humble heart and integrity. We must make 2014 a year that guarantees a bright future for the party.
The stakes are particularly high for the main opposition Democratic Party, which suffered a string of election defeats, starting with the 2012 presidential election. It plans to appeal to voters by accusing the Park administration of worsening the people's livelihoods and the nation's democracy.
In addition to protecting democracy and the people's livelihoods, we need an election victory this brand new year.
The Democratic Party recognizes the need for all-out reform and strengthened internal unity, as it has not only the ruling party to battle, but also a new party led by independent lawmaker An Chol-soo. An is pushing ahead with plans to form a third party that he says will overcome the old politics of the two-party system. His new party is fast gaining popularity in the southwestern Honam region, which has long been the Democratic Party's traditional power base.
The old system and way of thinking that wants to keep its vested rights by settling for regionalism and refusing to perform itself while talking down on the other must be eradicated starting in the Honam region.
An's new party is sure to split the opposition vote, but An has stressed that he won't merge with others, like he did in the 2012 presidential election when he unsuccessfully joined with the DP to try and get their candidate Moon Jae-in elected president. 김현지, Arirang News.
The new year is the time to make amends and bury old hatchets, but it is going to take a lot more to convince Korea to rebuild relations with Japan following recent high-profile visits to a controversial war shrine and Tokyo's incessant claims to Korean territory. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
As we begin 2014, bilateral relations between Korea and Japan are on bad footing, largely due to a series of visits to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine in recent days. A member of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet visited the shrine, which honors Japan's war dead and several Class A war criminals, on New Year's Day, less than 1 week after Abe made his own visit. Yoshitaka Shindo, Japan's Internal Affairs and Communications Minister, said he visited the shrine to pay respect to those who lost their lives in war. The Yasukuni Shrine is viewed by Korea and China as a symbol of Japan's wartime aggression. Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson Cho Tae-yong criticized Shindo's move, saying there seems to be a lack of historical awareness among high-profile Japanese political figures. Abe's New Year's address also hit a nerve with Seoul when he called for, quote, building a new Japan, vowing to defend Japanese territory, including its territorial waters and airspace. Japan will mark its annual Takeshima Day on February 22nd, which calls for Korea to return Korea's easternmost islet of Dokdo to Japan. The islets are Korean territory and are under Korean jurisdiction. Abe also suggested the country's pacifist constitution, imposed on Japan after the Second World War, should be amended and called for a more patriotic tone in the country's history textbooks, backing changes to how the Second World War is taught in schools. The Korean government is planning to call for changes to Japan's nationalistic stance by gaining support from the international community. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is due to visit Washington this month, right before a visit by Shotaro Yachi, a special advisor to Abe's cabinet. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gave a New Year's address on Wednesday amid widespread worries over Pyongyang's future, given the recent political upheaval in the reclusive state. For more on the regime's intentions and policy goals for 2014, we go one-on-one with Dr. Kim Hyun-wook, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So what stood out the most from this year's New Year's address compared to the one made last year?
Well, I think when I take a look, I think there might be several features. First one is that I think the New Year's speech definitely reflects the current situations of North Korea after the purge of Jang Song-taek. So there emerges a lot of words like the leadership of party, Kim Jong-un's leadership systems, so and so forth. So I think North Korea now is trying to establish the Kim Jong-un's system after the purge of Jang Song-taek and to establish and stabilize North Korea's domestic situation. So that's the first one. And second feature that I can find is that, the speech emphasized so much of economic policy of North Korea. But what is important in the speech was that they emphasized agriculture so much and construction industry. So I think by building and constructing a lot of infras, Kim Jong-un might try to show off, what he has done, to make the North Korea a wealthier country. That's one of the ways to consolidate his power. And also agriculture industry emphasis, I think, is that's the fastest way to achieve economic boom in North Korea. I mean, rather than other trade and investment, which takes a lot of time and a lot of complicated legal features. Agriculture, if you work hard, you'll make a lot of harvest, which would make you very, warm and So I think that's the easiest way to achieve economic achievement. So I think that's the second feature. And last feature, I think, was that the speech emphasized dialogue and in relationship with South Korea. I mean, of course, the last year, 2013 speech also emphasized a dialogue and inter-Korean relations. But I think this time, North Korea is trying to show that North Korea is a very peaceful country, have no hostile policy towards South Korea and the United States. So I think that's one of the policies that North Korea is trying to show off to South Korea, I think.
Well, let's delve into more in Kim's push for economic revival. I mean, he did talk about bolstering the economy, but he left out and did not mention international trade or foreign investment, which is an area his uncle, Chang Song-taek, had been heavily involved in. What does this imply?
Well, I think Chang Song-taek has been a key person for the trade relationship between North Korea and China. So I think, by mentioning a lot of investment and relationship, trade relationship, that would definitely make people to consider the importance of Chang Song-taek, which has been the key figure in that field. So I think, naming that kind of trade field would be a burden for, Kim Jong-un to make his economic policy. That's, I think, first way to stabilize the current situations. And second thing is that, not mentioning Chang Song-taek and not mentioning trade and investment relationship with foreign countries, I think would reflect the current economic situations of North Korea. Now, North Korea and China relationship is not very good. So I think in this bad relationship and bad situations, I think it might have been better for Kim Jong-un to focus on the North Korean, Seoul and independent economic policies rather than trade policies with foreign countries.
Well, in an apparent extension of olive branch to South Korea, Kim also called for better ties with Seoul. But we cannot, of course, not forget that he did make a similar policy goal last year, which was followed by military provocation in March and April. So how serious is he this time?
Well, many experts doubt the seriousness of peaceful, policy gestures of Kim Jong-un's speech. North Korea always, implied and argued that the reason why North Korea is possessing nuclear weapons is because of the hostile policies of the United States and South Korea towards North. That's why the purpose of North Korean nuclear development is for the purpose of self-defense. So I think in this kind of traditional policy posture still, remains effective in this speech. But second, more important reason, I think, is targeting China. In order for restoring a North Korea-China relationship, Kim Jong-un have not visited Beijing yet. So he needs to visit Beijing, and also he needs to normalize its relationship with China. Also has to restore the ongoing trade and economic project with China. There needs to be a restoration of China-North Korea relations. So I think, but in order for that, what China ordered and China requested North Korea was to maintain a peaceful inter-Korean relationship. China does not want any instability in the Korean Peninsula, so don't make any trouble. Have a good relationship with South Korea, then I will help you out. So I think in order for guaranteeing the help and assistance from China, I think this, emphasis on the inter-Korean relationship might be one of the gestures for, to achieve its relationship with China.
I see. And it wasn't all goodwill from the leader. He did warn South Korea and the United States of nuclear catastrophe. Now, what's your outlook on North Korea's nuclear ambition?
I don't think North Korea would ever abandon its nuclear weapons. That's very commonsensical. If I'm Kim Jong-un, I would definitely not give up, my own nuclear weapons. That's a very important tool to deal with foreign countries, including South Korea, United States, even China. So that's very, important and definite fact. But for now, what is important for the current situation is that even though North Korea tried hard to open a dialogue with the United States, open a six-party process last year, that did not, make true. I mean, there was no physical, result to open the dialogue. So, and now Jang Song-taek's purge makes the North Korean domestic situation much more complicated, which would make the United States, averse to opening a dialogue with North Korea. So I think for now, what I think North Korea can do is to be more active in opening a dialogue. And in order for that, I think first card North Korea need to use is China. If China works for the benefit of North Korea, I think for North Korean side, the possibility to open a dialogue would go much higher. So I think that's one thing North Korea might think right now. But I think more important than that is that after Jang Song-taek's purge, the domestic situations of North Korea would not be very favorable for a dialogue. I mean, definitely Jang Song-taek's purge would make Choi Ryong-hae the second leader, second key figure in North Korea, whose power base is military in North Korea. So I think the military people who would be more deeply involved in the policy making, I think would make a North Korean foreign policy much more hawkish, I think, which I don't think is helpful for opening a dialogue. So a six-party process in the year of 2014, I don't think it's very rosy.
It's unlikely.
No.
Well, back here in the South, President Park Geun-hye, in her New Year's message, she says she will be sticking to her trust-building process and based on formidable deterrence. Is this an ideal direction for Seoul's new North Korean policy?
Yes, I think so. I mean, what the current Park Geun-hye government policy toward North Korea, which is called as a trust-building policy, does not mean that it will only pursue a dialogue with North Korea, but at the same time pursue a deterrence against North Korea. Of course, dialogue is important, which would ultimately lead to a unification of the Korean Peninsula, but we cannot ignore the North Korean threats. So we have to pursue two simultaneous policies. So I think this is making sense. We are going in the same, right direction. What we need to do, though, is to have a very close coordination with the United States and China. When we do not have a very coordinated policies and have a diverse policy towards North Korea, I think that policy would fail in the end. So that's the first one we have to do. And second one is that we definitely have to be flexible. Even though there are, provocative behaviors in North Korea, but we still have to maintain a dialogue with North Korea. If North Korea is very favorable and peaceful and emphasizing the Korean dialogue, that would not mean that we have to loosen up our deterrence. So we have to be very flexible, but at the same time, we should not ignore the other policies, in the sake of abandoning this the other policies in the end.
Okay, so close cooperation with international community, but at the same time keeping a flexible stance for dialogue. Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Very vivid.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join Arirang's Yoo Ji-hae for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. Arirang News. Every weeknight, live on Arirang TV.
Those living in Korea will see bigger utility bills in 2014 as gas prices and postal delivery services are rising in the new year. The move has drawn criticism from some quarters as it will take a huge toll on the already tight budgets of the nation's low and middle income brackets. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Public utility charges are rising sharply from the start of the new year. With the price of food also on the rise, the price hikes are almost certain to increase the financial burden on households. Following hot on the heels of hikes in electricity and raw material prices, these increases are expected to occur over a wide range of fields. Starting January 1st, the Korea Gas Corporation raised the price of natural gas by roughly 5.8%. The price of gas for households went up by 5.7%, translating into an additional $4 per household per month. The industrial sector saw a 6.1% increase and the service sector a 5.5% hike. The hike follows a lift in electricity rates in November last year by an average of 5.4% in an attempt to curtail the nation's heavy electricity use. Transportation rates are also set to go up this year. The Korean Railroad Corporation is expected to increase rail prices by about 5%. The city of Ulsan is also considering plans to raise bus fares by 5%, while the western port city of Incheon raised taxi fares by an average of 17% last month. Post office parcel delivery service fees are also slated to rise starting next month. The Korea Post said an additional $1 will be added for packages, while it is also expected to impose transaction fees. The increase is the first in 9 years in a bid to make up for the deficit in postal services due to the reduction in post volume. The price of food and beverages has also gone up. Major confectionery companies, Lotte and Hete, have or are about to raise prices by an average of 11% and 8.7% respectively. Coca-Cola has also lifted the price of its soft drinks by 6.5%. Some local bakeries will also raise prices on about a third of their products by an average of 7.3% starting January 15th. Considering all the price hikes, it shouldn't come as a huge surprise to see that the Ministry of Strategy and Finance expects this year's inflation rate to be 2.3%, up from last year's 1.3%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And speaking of changes in 2014, here are some of them that will affect the financial sector this year as the nation aims to provide consumers a friendlier, safer environment to carry out their day-to-day financial activities. Yoo Ji-hae has more.
These are the fake 10 billion won checks that were cashed in the middle of last year. A jaw-dropping incident that proved that forgery on a large scale is still possible to this day. 10 billion won translates to roughly $10 million. To prevent further counterfeit checks, financial authorities have decided to adopt new security-enhanced designs.
We have made the letters that read cashier's check change color. Depending on which angle it's looked at, the letters will be either purple or green.
At the beginning of next month, ATM machines will no longer accept magnetic stripe cards. People will have to use what's called integrated circuit cards or IC cards to prevent people from using magnetic stripe cards that were duplicated from the original. As for cash advances, the terminology will change. Cash advance services using credit cards will now be called short-term card loans. This is to make it clear to consumers that the service is a type of a loan and not a cash withdrawal service. Now, 2014 also proves to be a better year for those that own domestic automobiles. Auto insurance for domestic cars will be slashed by an average of 2.9%, while those that own imported cars will pay more by an average of 11.3%. Finally, financial authorities have strengthened the penalty for accounting fraud. Presidents of companies or executive-level personnel found guilty now face up to 7 years in prison and $65,000 in fines. Yoo Ji-hae, Arirang News.
It looks like we are headed for another bright year on the nation's trade front. Korea's exports are expected to reach close to $600 billion in 2014, backed by steady signs of global economic recovery this year. Arirang News' Kim Young-gil has this report.
The future looks rosy for the Korean economy in the new year. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it expects the export total for this year to reach $595 billion, with imports expected to reach $562 billion. The positive outlook for this year comes after Korea's trade surplus widened to a new high of $44.2 billion in 2013. Exports continue to grow at a steady pace, reaching some $559 billion, the highest in the country's history, while imports dwindled. Strong outbound shipments of mobile phones, home appliances, and semiconductors are expected to drive exports in the coming year, with semiconductors sitting atop the export list. The economic recovery seen in many Western economies is likely to help Korea's exports stay on the upswing in 2014. The Korean automakers are hoping to sell more cars in the U.S. this year as the U.S. economy continues to pick up steam. The shipbuilding industry also expects a positive year, estimating double-digit growth.
Orders for offshore structures are on the rise. If the orders go well, it will boost exports this year.
Korea's steel industry faces a less certain 12 months.
China's steel production capacities have grown rapidly, threatening Korean steelmakers. It has become another China risk factor.
The weak Japanese yen may act as another hurdle to Korea's outbound shipments, but thanks to the international popularity of key product items, Korea's exports may break into new territory yet again this year. Kim Hyun-gyun, Arirang News.
Let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for an update. Now, Bo-kyung, we got off to a mild winter weather to the year in Seoul, but I hear other regions weren't as lucky.
That's right, Ji-hae. Although it was a mild winter day across the nation, a dry weather alert has been issued in Gangwon-do province and a dry weather warning in the southeastern coastal regions. Taking a look at the current conditions, as you can see, we have clear skies across the map due to a high pressure system from the West Sea. Now, we have some good news and bad news. The good news is that we will continue to have bearable weather conditions through next week, but keep in mind that an influenza spread watch has been issued, so make sure to wash your hands as frequently as possible. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at -1 degrees with a high of 9. Meanwhile, Busan hits 12. As for other regions, Daejeon hits 8 degrees while Dokdo makes it to 10. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, and back to you, Ji-hae.
Thanks, Bo-kyung, and that's a broadcast on this Thursday evening. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul. Thank you for watching.